Welcome back to EdUp Career Schools, the scoop where every story matters with your host, Kathy Belletti. So we all know that recently it feels like almost a school is closing every single week. And we understand the turnover in higher education has been crazy, especially in our admissions departments. And we have to get to the root of why this is happening. Why do we have so many amazing enrollment leaders walking out the door and advisors? Because the bottom line is if we continue to lose gifted enrollment leaders and advisors, guess what? The students are going to get hurt in the end, and these schools are going to continue to close. Okay, so of course I had to bring on two amazing, enrollment leaders who decided at one point, yeah, I'm done with this industry. I'm choosing something else. So first off, let's welcome Mr. Marco Velasquez and Jason McMillan. How you doing, fellas?
Good, good. Hello, hello. How are
Doing
you?
well. Hello, everybody.
Good, good, good. So, Marco, let's start with you. First off, how did you even get into higher education and what inspired you to become an enrollment leader?
I went into higher ed right after my undergrad, actually, probably like what, 12, 13 years ago now. And so I originally did it because I was like a call center sales guy, right? So I thought it was right up my alley. It was
Yeah.
perfect. But then you throw in the student aspect of it, right? And the outcomes and it was just like, okay, I'm good. I'm addicted to this, right? So that's how I got my start. And then what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
What inspired you to become an enrollment leader?
Um, Actually, I would say that what inspired me is other leaders. They saw something in myself that I apparently I didn't see at the time. I would even say one of them directly told me like, "Hey, I'm going to take you under my wing, and this is what's going to happen. And if you do X, Y, and Z, then this is what you can expect." So I followed through. He followed through, and it was like the rest is history, right? Which is not always the case because I've been in other situations where they're like,
Hmm.
"Hey, you do this, this happens," and I do it tenfold, right? And it's like, yeah, right. So that was actually a good intro to something that was not to be expected down the line, but it was a good, pretty good introduction there that inspired me to continue being an enrollment leader at that point.
Interesting. Did you actually want to take on that role? Because there's a lot of advisors, they're like, yeah, I don't want any part of it. I'm good where I'm at.
I've seen that, and yes, I did, so much so that they were like, "Well, it doesn't come with a pay raise." I'm like, "That's all right. Go ahead, sign me up." Yeah, young, young, young. So
Uh, okay, we're going to get to that. I
it was a short-lived position. I moved on from there, but that's
got it.
literally like how bad I wanted to do it. When you mention
Got it.
others don't, I've seen it where they're just like, no, I just want my 8 to 5 or my nine to
Yeah.
six. I was not that person. Once they saw that they believed in me, I was like, sign me up, put me in. If I suck, let me suck, right?
Yeah, true. What about you, Jason?
Yeah, very similar story. I think the difference with me was I kind of fell into it by accident. It was something that I really was not looking to get into. When I actually applied as an advisor, I was actually thinking, because again, I came from the non-traditional side of college and all that. So I literally thought I was signing up to be a college advisor, like I was used to seeing on the college campus. So I had no idea about the business side of what we do. So it was really by accident that I kind of got into it. But what intrigued me was during the interview process, I actually went through it. And then they kind of gave me the gist of what I was getting into, what I was walking into, and all of that. And that part intrigued me. And I was like, oh, okay, I think it's something I can do this. I'm good at talking with people. I can relate and connect with people. So I'm like, all right, let me try it out. And I tried it and I did it. And 20 years later,
Wow.
I ended up doing it. So it was by accident originally, and then once I got into it, kind of like Mark, it was just like the bug bit me, and then from that point on, I just kept going. And from that point, I wanted to see, okay, how far can I really take this thing? And I just said, okay, let's go, and we're gonna see where it goes. And that was really kind of how I got into it.
Interesting. It's funny. A lot of people say that they fell into higher education by
Mhm.
accident. And
Yeah.
this is one of the toughest roles that anybody could ever take on. So, if I were to ask you, what did you love about being an enrollment leader? What about you, Jason?
Um, I think the biggest part was I love building the team. I think that was something that I truly enjoyed being able to connect with the team, being able to kind of play role reversal in the context of me being the director, but also I remember being in that advisor role as well and kind of wanting to see, okay, where can I go? And kind of similar story to what Marco gave an example of I saw stories of where people would promise a lot of things and wouldn't necessarily deliver on them. And so I kind of took that position where I didn't want to be that, And so for me, it was I took that mindset into my role. And so if I went into it and said, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to accomplish, I would give my all, and try to do it, whether we fell short or not. I was going to give my all into it and say, okay, this is what we're going to do because I said we're going to do it. So we're going to follow through and get it done. So for me, it was just building the team, having that connection with the team, and really kind of getting in and kind of working with the team as well, but also teaching the team, but also learning from them as well. Because that's one thing that I kind of learned as a leader. You don't know it all, right? So it's always where you can sit back and I can learn just as much from the advisors or as much as they can learn from me. So that part of it for me was definitely the most enjoyable part for me.
Interesting that you say that because I think that's what's lacking in a lot of leaders. They want to be the smartest person in the room, and that's not true leadership. You have to understand that when it comes to leadership, number one, it's a responsibility, but you're always learning. And I learned a lot from advisors that I've never even heard of before. Some of the things that they come up with is like, oh, okay. But as a leader, you have to get that ego out the way where you can let your team know, I don't know anything. I don't know everything that there is to know. What about you, Marco?
Along the same lines, building the team, but more so, I would say saving reps, right? You have those that are on the way out or they're not doing so hot, and they're gonna minimize the screen when you pass by, but they're on Indeed or something like that, right? During hours. So it's like, how do I get them dialed back in, right? And just being able to be on the other side, because at one point fun fact, Jason's even been my DOA at one point, right? And like he's brought me in and had conversations with me. So being on the other side and using my past mentors and like, all right, that really spoke to me, be trying things out and failing, right? Because if you're not failing, then you're not even trying, right? So failing day after day of failing and getting it together and coming up with new action plans, and then more so than anything, speaking to the saving people, right? Having that plan where you may have a coaching and counseling, you may have a PIP, right? And lo and behold, 30 days later, this person's maybe not your top performer, but they're steady Eddie. And you were like, dude, I was already thinking like you were not going to make it. And it was more of a skill versus will issue, but you got it together. And it has to do more so than the rep itself with us as a leader. How do we connect with them? Because they just go to another school and make a better connection there. And, the talent that you could have had is now over there, right? Thriving and flourishing.
That's very interesting that you say that. You bring up PIPs, right? Because sometimes enrollment leaders, it's like fix a team. You end up in a spot where you have to fix the entire team, and they bring in old habits from other directors. And I had a team of 5 at one of my previous campuses, and I had the entire team on a PIP at the same time. All 5 of them were on the 30-day because they thought it was a game. But guess what? At the end of that 30-day, when I called them into the office one by one to tell them congratulations, they all cried one by one. Sometimes, advisors like to push the limits and they call you bluff a lot of times until they don't, But I think what I loved was the camaraderie. There were so many times where we were right at the brink of a class start and we almost missed, and to see the entire team come together. And it's like, all right, so this is what we can do. And then we exceed those expectations because they understood that there was no I, but it's more like, we're going to do this. We win together. We fail together. But then also as an enrollment leader, building relationships with other counterparts in other departments. Some of the staff that I've met, some of them are actually my son's godparents, So I've met some amazing people in leadership as well. You were about to say something, Jason?
Yeah, so if I want to piggyback off what Marco said, because he jogged a memory for me. I remember back when Marco and I worked together, give him his flowers as well. The funny thing was, I remember Marco was this young guy, and Marco was so full of energy, right? and Marco had that hunger about him. Marco didn't know what he was doing, but because he was new to the game, so he was new to the industry and all that. But the one thing that I did love about him, kind of about what we're talking about, was he had that hunger and he wanted to learn. And like he said, whether he failed or not, he still kept trying, no matter what it was. And for me, as in my position I was in at the time with him, that was something that you can't teach that. That's something you
Yeah.
either have it or you don't. And that was something that he had. And so it's like, for me to sit here now with him compared to where we were years ago,
Mhm.
it's a proud moment. So I'm definitely proud of
Aw.
Marco of where he's at right now. So much love to you.
Thank
Love it, love it. So let's get into some of the challenges. Like, how much time we have? No, I'm just kidding. When it comes to the challenges, okay, of enrollment leadership, okay, there's so many people that are struggling in this role,
Mhm.
but the more that we're able to educate a lot of executive leaders on what's really going on within the admissions departments, I think we'll be able to save a few. Okay,
Mhm.
so who wants to go first when we're talking about some of the challenges as an enrollment leader?
Marco, you go ahead.
Okay. Biggest challenge, of course, is the outcome, the production. But I think what goes into it, right, is probably when you start digging deep, that's where the true challenges come in, right? Like, why aren't folks excited about making $100 a day, right? Or things like that. Where, like, if you ask yourself, it's like there's an obvious answer to it, but then there's something beneath the surface, and
Yeah.
every team is going to have that customizable training. So
Yeah.
for me, it's figuring that out. It's a puzzle every time. And I wouldn't say I've made the mistake of, but I've had the displeasure of moving out of town for a DOA role or a higher ed role, right? And when you
Mhm.
inherit a team, it's like you
Mhm.
never know what's going to happen. Is is
Yeah.
Mhm.
is the team going to rebel? Are they going to get along? Are they going to
Mhm.
fly the coop, or half going to stay? You never know. So, and sometimes it looks like one thing's happening and another happens because they all talk to each other, right? And
Yep.
sometimes it's like, well, let's put on the facade and act like we're all in, but we're all going to leave to the school
Yep.
that are former DOAs that are. So, I've seen it all. So
Yeah.
you just have to go in with a clear head and not be like, oh, I've seen this rerun, because it will bite you. So, for me,
Mhm.
it's figuring it out and taking it from day one and using your resources too, because there's always somebody on campus that
Mhm.
knows their stuff. And if you don't utilize them, they're not gonna come knocking on the door and say, hey, you're doing what we did back in '08, and let me tell you why. So you really just got to make those connections and almost manage by walking around and step outside of your own department if you want to be successful.
Mhm.
Absolutely. What I've seen as a challenge in leadership, which I don't think a lot of advisors understand, leaders are under a lot of pressure also. Okay.
Mhm.
And a lot
Mhm.
of enrollment leaders, they don't have the support from their executive team either. So
Mhm.
sometimes you would talk to the executives and they're giving you an expectation for your team, and you're going to bat and you're saying, there's no way my team is going to be able to bring in 500 in the next 2 weeks. Where did you get this number from? And it's
Mhm.
more like, make it happen. And now
Mhm.
you have to transfer that energy and that message to your
Mhm.
advisors. And they're
Mhm.
looking at you like, how are we supposed to do this? And in your mind, you're like, I don't know, but we're going
Mhm.
to try to get as close
Mhm.
to this as possible. And I
Yeah.
think that sometimes advisors don't understand that leaders are under pressure too.
Yep.
Another
Mhm.
thing that I've seen is sometimes, depending on the school, enrollment leaders, they don't really have a voice or a say in anything that happens with their team. You have
Mhm.
some schools where the GOAs, they get to choose, what their team needs. They have that person that they can go to and say, these are the problems that are going on within our departments. How can we fix this? But then you have other schools where it's like you're just an order taker, just like your advisors, and your team
Mhm.
members don't always understand that. Well, what
Yeah.
about you, Jason? What are some of the challenges you've seen as an enrollment leader?
It's funny. I'm listening to Marco, and I kind of equate what we do because I'm a sports guy, so I look at it as a coach, right? That a lot of times the team doesn't realize the coach is always on the hot seat. Like,
Always.
no matter what it is, like you're always on the hot seat, whether it's um, justifiable or not. At the end of the day, it's to me, we've kind of gotten to this point of where it's like we want the win, and it's not about how do you get to the win. It's all about, like you said, we want the results. No matter what, they want you to get it done and figure out how to do it. Well, that's the challenge of it all is, okay, like you said, if you're giving me unrealistic expectations, if I go back and look at the trends, if I go back and look at how this team has performed prior to, I can tell you that's not realistic. But
Yeah,
who's going to listen? Who's going to listen to that, and who is really supporting us? When it comes down to that part of it. But I think that's the hardest part in it, is that understanding that we're always in the hot seat and we're always looking over our shoulder, no matter what, because at the end of the day, okay, well, if I don't make this start, all right, when's that next email going to come, or when's that PIP, going to come, as a DOA, it's always that you're always constantly thinking about, oh my God, how that self-preservation, but at the same time, how do you balance that? And then you have to get your team to get the results as well. And that's the hard part of how do you take that part of it, the stress, the pressure, the all of the above. Oh, but I need to support my team though. I need to make sure that they're happy. I need to make sure, as Marco said, I need to make sure they're making the dials. I need to make sure they're doing the appointments. I need to make sure they're doing the interviews. Now I got to sit in on the interviews. How well are the interviews going? Okay, let's look at it's so much to try to figure that part of it, but I think that is the challenge of it. Of as a director, when you're in that seat, like you always feel like you're in the hot seat, and how do you balance that aspect of it and translate it into a team and make that team successful? For me.
absolutely. And this is why leaders burn out too. We always talk
Yes.
about how advisors burn out, but leaders burn out because you get that leadership guilt. You know how they say mom guilt when
Yep.
you start to feel like, oh my gosh, maybe I need to spend some time with my kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
The same thing
Mm-hmm.
with leaders, because you have so many tasks that you're inundated with throughout the day. And then you're like, oh my gosh, maybe I need to check on my team. But then
Mm-hmm.
also, leaders have to carry a lot of emotional stamina
Mm-hmm.
also, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you see that your team is hurting, but at the same time, my cup is empty. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have anything else to give today, but your team members need you throughout
Yep.
the day for multiple reasons. And a lot of times, leaders have to continuously suck that up and push
Mm-hmm.
themselves to the side in order to show up for their teams. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not easy because we're all human, right?
Correct.
And it
Yep.
actually ties into some of the challenges in admissions as a whole. All right. So when you think about the challenges, too many leads. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Advisors are under pressure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's too many leads coming through the doors for advisors. I would say an average advisor can handle 40 to 45 leads a week. Period. If you're actually managing lead flow correctly and you're doing the follow-ups that you should be doing,
Mm-hmm.
45 is a good number. I've worked with schools where every advisor has over 300
Mm-hmm.
per week, per
Mm-hmm.
person. That's
Mm-hmm.
insane. These
Mm-hmm.
students are not getting, the calls and the follow-up that they should, right? And
Right.
then you have lack of training. Jason, you brought this up earlier, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about expectations
Mm-hmm.
that are like, are you kidding me? That's mind-boggling. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times when people think of expectations that they can't reach, sometimes it's not that they can't reach it, is that they're not given a plan on
Mm-hmm.
how to actually get there.
Right.
And I
Right.
think what a lot of leaders assume is because you have an advisor who came in with all of these skills on their resume,
Mm-hmm.
they don't need the support. It's like I
Right.
hired you because I don't need to do this extra
Mm-hmm.
training. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing when you have an enrollment leader who's hired, right? The
Mm-hmm.
support goes out the window. I've had campus presidents who say, I don't have meetings with any of my staff because I hired them because they're the expert. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that they don't need your support at some point along the way.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the challenges that you guys have seen in admissions as a whole?
I would say, kind of like you said, the training aspect of it. I think the I always say training is an art, right? Because you always have to be creative in the way that you're training your team. Because my philosophy is there is no one size fits all training. At the end of the day, you can have a training plan and say, okay, well, this is what the admissions training is.
Hmm.
Okay, I've been in places where you sit at the computer and your training is you sit at that computer, and once you're done with the mods, okay, I need you on the floor, and then you just start making phone calls.
Hmm.
Like that may work for some, but there's others that they're much more hands-on, so you have to be a lot more creative. And I think the training part of it gets lost within admissions, because it isn't just, okay, I trained you when you first hired, and here we are 6 months down the road, or even a week down the road. Why aren't you making the expectations. Why aren't you doing it? Well, where's the follow-up piece to the training part? Like, you can't just say, okay, I trained you once and then that's it. It's a continual training process. And I think just that aspect of admissions, to me, it gets lost in the results that we have to get, and where it's like, okay, we can get those results, but I need to train them and get them where I need them to be in order to, or give them the tools that they need, in order to actually get those results that we're trying to obtain. So I think the training aspect is definitely the an issue for sure.
Absolutely, especially to keep in mind that most advisors hate training because to them it's a punishment.
Correct.
I,
Correct.
I came from that type of organization where if you were sitting on a training call, you were the
Mhm.
laughing stock of the department.
Yep.
People would walk past your desk and they're like, yo, you weren't training? You sucked last week. Yo, see you after
Uh-huh.
lunch. You know,
Yep.
it's like, you're
Yep.
not
Those
training
Friday calls.
skills. It's like you're in the principal's office if you're in the
Hmm.
training call. So this is
Yep.
why so many advisors, they don't embrace it at all
Hmm.
instead of using it as a resource. What about you, Marco? What are some things that you've seen in admissions departments as a whole? That's
Uh,
the issue.
Stewardship more than anything. I mean, it can even go hand in hand with what Jason said, right? Like
Mhm.
the training, it's either not there, or we could take the coin on your side, Kathy. Right? There's so many schools I've been at where the training is necessary. They don't want to invest, right? They hire, right? So they don't want to invest in the training. It's like, okay, and it's like, oh, well, that's okay. You hired me so I can train the team. Then you got these admin duties. You don't want to invest in an assistant, right? So there's just there's a lot of stewardship, right? And it even goes back to what you said earlier, where you might have been somewhere along the lines where it's like, hey, this is what we want, this is what we need, this is the final number, and your team can't hit it. Your team knows you can't hit it, but you in the middle, you have to kind of get them there, right, as a vehicle. But it reminds me more because I'm getting old nowadays, right? So I see a lot of things where I'm like, this is how much? Oh man, back in '04, right? So like it's kind of like that, right? They giving us $3 and they saying they go bring me a tank of gas, right? And it's like, well, let me tell you a little something. Since you ain't been on the floor, you ain't been out there in a minute, right? That's not gonna
Hmm.
cut it, right? But maybe we should talk about, hey, for with these $3, what's the closest we could get to that gallon of gas, right? And how can we make up the difference? But we don't really have that conversation. So, like to me, it's really just stewardship of what we have. Because when you miss your goal, you usually don't miss it, or when you fail at anything, right? You usually don't fail or miss it because you didn't have what you needed. It's usually because you didn't use what you had to the fullest, right? Efficiency, if you will. So for me, when I look at it as a whole, it's stewardship. I mean, we've got the same tools we've always had, and even more some when we look at technology and automation and things of that. But how are we
Hmm.
using it, right? And are we starting with the end in mind, to go back to Covey even? But with like we know where we want to end up, but then somewhere along the way there's no roadmap. So when we miss a mark and we go back and we think about why we missed, a lot of those conversations could be had around that stewardship. This area here, that area here. Look, we had all this, or even back to too many leads, right? Well, what are we doing with these?
Hmm. Hmm.
Exactly. I would also say the separation between departments too. We all know that
Hmm.
admissions and financial aid has never played nice in the sandbox. I mean, it's what I've seen. It's like it's ridiculous. And I've been in
Hmm.
some schools where there's some great synergy between the departments. But then also, I feel like what happens with admissions, they always feel like they have to be on the defense because
Hmm.
every single department is like it's always admissions, it's them, is them, is them. And
Hmm.
I had told a story before when I had first started at a culinary school, and he was telling me, listen, this entire school is pissed off at the admissions departments. And I'm like, all right, put me in the room with them. My first
Hmm.
day, he's like, I'm not sure you want to do that. And I'm like, no, put me in the room. Every single department was in this room my very first day, except for admissions. And they were going at it. The first chef raises his hand and he goes, if they have a pulse, admissions enrolls them. And I worked in some schools where it's like, okay, well, that's actually
Hmm.
true. Right. But for the most part, it's not necessarily the truth. And I think a lot of departments don't understand what an advisor has to go through on the phones just to get one person to show up.
Right.
And then you have the leadership staff that has way more on their plate because you have some leaders who are writing DOAs and
Hmm.
they're given the same expectations as an advisor whose only role is to make sure that you actually make those calls, you interview those students, you get them butts and seats. But then you're given an enrollment leader who has that plus 10,000, different tasks on their plate, the same expectations as their, the people that they're supposed to be supporting. It doesn't make any sense. There needs to be way more cross training within departments, because I think if financial aid understood what an advisor does, and if admissions understood what financial aid does, and then instructors and career services, there would be so much more camaraderie when it comes to the school as a whole. Period.
Agreed.
All right.
Agreed.
So now we're coming down to the magic question. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Why did you decide to hang up that hat and say, deuces, I'm out? Marco, you look like you're like, please let me go first.
Am I? No, but I can start. I mean, for me, more than anything is, I did it for so long. I saw, a lot of what was happening, and I really just decided to explore other avenues. I did for a year. I came back recently, right? So, it's for me, it's like I left, and then I thought to myself, well, the changes I want to see aren't going to happen unless I'm in the weeds, right? So that's kind of where I had that moment for myself. But more than anything, what drove me away is a lot of the times I felt like I had my hands tied, and like it's like I have a solution, but it can't be that one from what I've been told, right? It's like, here's the solution, it's viable, it's legal, it's ethical, it works, it's gonna get us there. But XYZ didn't come up with it. Heck, I didn't even come up with it, because again, we're okay with not always being the smartest person in the room. But you have egos and things sometimes. So for me, having hands tied, and it was not I can't pinpoint like just one place. It happened multiple. So I was like, all right, I need a reset. And once I got that for about a year or so, I thought, I saw, podcasts, postings, talking to former colleagues. And I'm like, well, nothing's really changed. So I might as well get back in there and see if I could get it cracking again, right?
Optimism. I love it.
Jason, that's the mark.
It was half full the entire time.
That's the Marco I remember. I think for me, honestly, it was the burnout piece of it for me. I invested a little over 20 years in the industry, from an advisor all the way up to director, DOA, director of operations. Like I've had those roles in my career. And I think it was just for me, it was the burnout, where I'm kind of telling myself. So I remember when I first started in the industry, I still remember my very first student that I enrolled, right? And I remember him, and tell you this really quick story. I remember him because I remember he was an older guy. And I started out as an online advisor, is actually where I started out. And he was an older guy. He was a door greeter at Walmart, right? And we get on the phone, build a connection, make a long story short, he felt as though that he couldn't do anything because he was old, because of his age. He's like, nobody wants to hire me, nobody wants to do anything. And at the time, I was enrolling for a MBA program. Enrolled him into the MBA program, right? Got him in. We had the connection. We talked, made it happen. Well, the funny thing was he ended up graduating. And once he graduated, he actually ended up working in the school system, right? And this was back in 98, 99. And I still remember this story, and I still remember his name. Won't mention it, but I still remember everything about him. We connected on LinkedIn, right? And from that moment on, all of these years, we still remain in contact through LinkedIn. And his life completely changed. To me, that feeling got lost for me, of where that feeling of knowing that you changed somebody's life, knowing that you had a positive impact on that person, even when that person didn't even see it in themselves, even when that person didn't believe, okay, I'm at this point, I'm older, nobody wants to hire me. I heard it all. And it was the matter of the fact that he trusted me in that moment. And the fact that I was able to show him, like, yes, it is a possibility for you. And I think he's a teacher and everything. And he's going in education, all of that. That feeling was the best feeling in the world. And the fact that when he graduated, he reached out to me and thanked me, for that. And, a lot of times when we're in this role, it's sometimes a thankless position, when it comes down to it. But the fact that he did that for me, I still remember it till this day, you know. And so that feeling was lost for me. And so it was because of that, it was like that's why I got into it in the beginning. I didn't get into it just to say, okay, I want to enroll people. You know what I mean? Like that was not why, that wasn't my why. So for me, being able to help people, being able to assist people, being able to see people grow, all of those things, it just kind of got lost. And so for me, it was once that burning desire was kind of diminished, it was like, okay, all right, I think I'm at my point now of where, all right, I got to find that feeling somewhere else because that's the whole purpose of me doing it when I got into it 20 years ago. So for me, that was why, for me, it was like, all right, let's look at some other options. Now I did the same thing that Marco did. I got out for a little bit and came back because I'm always like him. I'm optimistic. Like, oh, we can figure it out. There's a new way. There's a new podcast I heard. There's a new book I read. There's something new, so you want to go back like, okay, I think I can do it. But it kind of got to that point where I'm like, yeah, no, I'm good. And that's what it was for me. It was the burnout. That's really what it was for me.
Yeah. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of people. When you feel as if you've lost your purpose, it's
Yeah.
normally that time, to hang up the hat. And also, sometimes people have been in careers for a very long time and
Mhm.
the career is no longer in line with who they are today.
Yeah.
But then they
Yeah.
feel as if they're obligated to stay. They're
Mhm.
obligated to stay with that company because they gave them their first shot. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I think too many people are, putting themselves and their needs and what they're passionate about to the side to
Mhm.
stay with the company, especially everything that's going on within the world, you know. But at some
Mhm.
point, you have to think to yourself, life is too short. If this no
Yeah.
longer ignites my fire, it is time to move on. And I have, Marco knows this. I've tried to leave higher ed more times than I'm willing to admit, you
Mhm.
know but
Mhm.
it's just that feeling that comes back where it's like, okay, God isn't finished with me just yet.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
there's so many things that are focused around why people say this is no longer for me. Because you wake up in the morning and you just don't feel that fulfillment and that excitement of going in to see students. And that's
Right.
what this is all about. So we
Mhm.
never want to leave without giving people tips, on how executives can, do a better job to prevent more people from leaving. And so, do you guys have any tips for executives on how we can prevent schools from losing more gifted folks?
I would say connection,
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost. You got humans working there. It doesn't seem like that even for us sometimes because like
Mm-hmm.
I've worked at schools where you got starts every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, every 5 weeks, every 6 weeks, right? So we got to keep it churning. But I would think just a connection. Who's the person behind the email? That would be a little bit of a good connection. I've actually
Mhm.
worked at schools where I've never met my leader. They're just like, oh, well, you get it done. It's all good. I don't have to go down to the campus. I've got other headaches at my other campuses or what have you. But I do think, and not even connecting like at the leadership level, like you might even want to shake some hands at the rep level too. Come on, all the way down to it, and even the students,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
very rarely does it happen. I'm not saying never because I'm currently seeing it happen, and I've seen it in recent times as well with the last place I was at too, and even before that. But more often than not, that's really not the case when you're talking
Mhm.
corporate schools. Mom and pop schools, maybe, but corporations, you really don't get that connect. It's like, here you go. Heard those Stanley Cups were cool online, and you hit your budget. Let me send you one of them bad boys, right?
Absolutely. That is so true. What about you, Jason?
Yeah, I piggyback on that. I think also transparency, excuse me, is something that is very important because, like you said, we're all human, at the end of the day, and we're more than just a number. We're more than that. It's the challenges of it. Everything, the effort, the just everything that's involved in order to get the results.
Mm-hmm.
It's there's a person behind that, and like you said, not just as the DOA, but also as the team, because a lot of times the team can hear from your higher ups. That can even help and be a bigger boost to help the DOA, in their role and what they're trying to accomplish as well. Because at the end of the day, the team can sit back and look and say, okay, well, the DOA has the support from whomever, whatever, higher up. that also helps ignite it as well. So a lot of times it gives a little bit more synergy into everything that we're trying to accomplish, and it really truly creates one team versus just you got corporate and then you got us kind
Yeah.
of thing. It's like create a synergy that's there so that way everybody feels like they're a part of it. Um, I feel like a lot of times we get bought into and we sell, oh, we're a family, or we're this and we're that. And it's like,
That's right.
okay, like, can we follow up with that though? Can we actually be
Mhm.
that versus saying it and making it sound like, oh yeah, we are. How about we actually do that? How about we actually say, okay, yeah, we are a family, but we're going to look out for one another in the context of, let me just call and check on you. How are you doing? Everything's okay. That kind of thing. Because I think a lot of times that helps. And like you said, the DOAs are burned out, your team's burned out, you got interdepartment issues going on as well.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge that admissions is also dealing with, in addition to all of the expectations, that are actually there as well. That's coming from corporate, where you got stuff on the campus too that goes on that nobody talks about. And so it's kind of like just create that synergy, and that will actually go a long way, for not just the DOA but also for the admissions team as a whole.
Absolutely. First off, I that we're like a family. That term
Hmm.
is so cringeworthy to me, and every time I see it on the advertisement, I'm like, please stop saying that. I had one DOA who always used to say it on every call, and I'm like, stop saying that.
Hmm.
Okay, the bottom line is, your family does not make you feel this way.
Right.
Okay, your family, if you're a true family, a true trooper to someone, you're always acknowledging them, you're
Right.
always building
Mhm.
them, you're always saying, what, amazing job, yes, you can do it. In those times where you feel as if, I'm way over my head. And in a lot of cases with these schools, that's not how leaders feel. Leaders
Mhm.
feel as if they're just push,
Toxic
push, push.
family.
Exactly.
Right.
A traumatic family that the children post TikToks about years down the line.
Yep.
Exactly. So it's like really going back to the meaning of what does that really mean? Okay, a
Hmm.
family. You can
Hmm.
say that we strive to be one, but at the end of the day, I mean, one of the reasons why I left is because of the politics and the toxicity. It was getting to the point where it's like, I didn't come here for this,
Right.
and we're
Right.
really supposed to be here for the students. So what is all of this? This has nothing to do with anything. And when
Hmm.
you're going to work and you feel as if your heart is so heavy, I've been in situations where I'm crying on the highway on my way to work. Like, what?
Hmm. Hmm.
That means that it's
Hmm.
time to go. All right.
Hmm.
But do you guys have any last thoughts for our leaders who may be trying to get into leadership, or some leaders who are in the role and they're struggling and they may be thinking to themselves, maybe it's my time?
I'll let Marco take that one first.
So I would say to those looking to get into leadership, right? Just keep trying. If it's not happening where you're at, believe me, there's 50 states, right, and beyond, right, with
Yeah.
online. And most of the time, if you feel like you are cut out for it, you probably are. You just got to tap into your inner self and know that there's not going to be a red carpet rolled out. In fact, there's going to be gatekeepers. So you can't get down on yourself there.
Absolutely.
And as far as leaders, keep your head up because it's a lonely island, especially as a DOA. I mean,
Yeah.
you're serving various masters at times, and then you have your team that as much as you want to say, I don't care if they like me. Well, it's a lot easier if they do follow your lead, right? So how can you
Mhm.
get to that point, and how can you still hit the budget? Because at the end of the day, we've got a business to run. It is outcome
Yep.
oriented, but it is a people serving business, right? And if you keep the
Mhm.
students first, which a lot of the times that gets lost beneath everything, right? But if you keep the students first, most of the time the rest takes care of itself. Or those small little problems you can find solutions to along the way instead of having all these big issues that pile up on you.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Love it. All
Yeah.
right, Jason.
Um, I will piggyback off what Marco said, to a certain extent. I think the biggest point that he pointed out is you have to realize it's a business at the end of the day, right? Um, but don't get lost in the business part of it. The business is there. It's what we do. You have to do it. It's the necessary evil when it comes down to it, right? But keep positive in your delivery, keep positive in your words, keep positive in your activities, because at the end of the day, your team feeds off of you, whether it's positive or negative, whatever it may be. they're going to follow you no matter whether you want them to or not. Kind of like Marco said, well, I don't care if they don't like me. Okay, well, that's not going to get you far at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, understand that the team will follow you, whether it's positive or negative, they will follow you. But try to find some way to stay motivated, whether it's if it's a podcast, whether it's meditation, whether it's whatever it may be. Do things that will take care of yourself, so that way you can be assistance to others and you can be what that team will need from you. Because at the end of the day, the team needs that DOA for guidance. Like they need them for that. They need not just guys, they need the motivation, they need the positivity, like they need that to come from their DOA. Because a lot of times it's not going to come from anyone else. So it's got to come from you somehow, some way. So never forget yourself in that process, when it comes down to it.
Absolutely.
Whatever that may be, whatever that looks like for you, do that, and you'll get through it. Just stay positive, keep focusing, and as they always say, put one foot in front of the other, and just keep moving, and it'll actually eventually it'll pay off. It's going to be some bumps in the road. It's going to be rough. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. But if you have that there, and then have that support system, have someone that can help you continue to keep your head up, and can keep you moving forward.
Absolutely. I love it. So I'm going to close with these two things. Number one, for executives, if you really want to create that relationship with your enrollment leaders, have one-on-ones. We always talk about conducting one-on-ones with advisors, but your leaders, they need that personal time with you also, because a lot of your leaders are drowning and you have no idea. And this is why sometimes you receive a 1-day notice, because let's get real, a lot of people are not giving 2 days notice, 2 weeks notices anymore. Sometimes it's by 3 o'clock, I'm out of here. Thank you. Here's this piece of paper. And a lot of these issues could have been avoided a while back if you got in front of that in the first place. For anyone who's actually looking to get into leadership, you have to understand that it's a responsibility. I always say the best leaders are the ones who have teams who show up and go the extra mile because they want to, not because they absolutely need to. All right. So keep that in mind. There's so many advisors who are they're top reps and they're like, you know what, I want to get into leadership. But do you really understand what a true leader is? It's not just about a title. It is a huge responsibility, but it is one of the most fulfilling roles that you can take on to inspire a group of people and promote out other leaders. All right, Jason and Marco, thank you guys so much for being here. As usual, you guys are the bomb. All right, Gen Z folks, you've never even heard that term before. But thank you guys for being here. Until next time, bye everyone.
Take care.
Bye.